Okay, so the final part of the demo and the one that you are required to do is to actually go ahead and start learning how to render out a preview movie with all the settings pretty much activated. So what I want you to do is, if you've had follow along already up to this point, you could go ahead and render out the one that you have. But if not, you could go ahead and go File, Open, and you could are perfectly fine using our demo scene. Okay, you could use the final or the basic scene reconstruction one. Either or will be perfect for the solution. The other thing that you're going to be doing throughout this is after you watch all these videos, you're going to submit also kind of a walkthrough. You're going to let us know what you have learned throughout the process. You could showcase your own scenes. You could talk about the scenes that we have and kind of give us a very brief overview of what you learned. Keep it around 5 minutes, around there. If you go above 5 minutes, that's perfectly fine, but try to keep it around that range. It doesn't need to be long. It needs to be mostly describing, hey, I learned this aspect of it. These are the areas of the interface. Kind of talk a little bit about those things, and mostly what you learn about the tracking and things like that. Keep in mind that we haven't covered everything that you can about the software. We try to cover as much as possible for the purpose of tackling a shot. But when we get complex shots, there are issues with those that we need to approach in a different way or a different scenario. Every shot is unique, so no two shots will use exactly the same techniques. So always keep that in mind and don't try to put everything in the same box. In this shot, for example, it was so good in the sense that the way that we tracked it, it was almost perfect from the beginning. But not every shot will be like this. Okay, so keep that in mind. We didn't go over the graph editor for or the graph section to be able to tweak the trackers even more or to clean up those trackers looking at the graph. So those are things that we will hit on a couple of the other shots as we move along the course. So keep that in mind. So let's go now and start with this one in the rendering process. So how we need to render. So the first thing is you evaluate the shot just before you actually output. Um, the purpose of the preview render is for quality control. At this stage, you send this to your supervisor. It goes through a rigorous QC process before it moves to the next stage of the pipeline. So it's very important that you understand exactly what is happening. So one of the things that I forgot here that I know we're going to do is going to come up in the QC is actually these trackers that are on the ground. And what I want to do with that is I want to show you one more technique of rebuilding that because I know it's going to come up if I give this to a supervisor. Hey, I need to see this as a geometry as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on pan here. I'm in the perspective view and I'm on the 3D tab. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate here. You can hold down the Alt key so you can navigate like Maya. And this one is going to be very important because it's going to pretty much allow us to create geometry. This might be a little bit more advanced. Again, you're not required to do this, but I want to show you how to do it because you're going to be doing it in the next couple of iterations. So one of the things that I could do here in order to build geometry is I could triangulate these pieces of geometry very quickly. And if you notice in the 3D view, there's this little toolbar here. And what that does is activate extra menus that we could see around. Okay, and we can move them anywhere on the screen. So if you notice I'm navigating, I'm going into a top view mode. So what I want to do here is I want to go to the top view like this, holding down the Alt key. Okay, because it's going to be very important. It's in the direction of the view that we're going to be able to create this geometry. So the goal here is I'm going to select these trackers and I'm going to make those trackers a vertice. So let's go ahead and start with that. So I'm going to open the mesh component here in the toolbar. I'm going to move it close here and I'm going to select the first tracker. I'm just going to click on it. Now, if you don't, if this technique is going to work a little bit easier because I already have group trackers like this. So by clicking on the first one, what I could do is I'm going to show you how to select tracker by colors. So I'm going to go ahead and go to edit, and because we're selecting, I'm going to select same color. So based on that blue now, any tracker that has exactly the same color, that's why I assign all the trackers that I want at the same time. By some reason I forgot a tracker and I don't know exactly the color that that tracker is, the number, then I will reselect all the other trackers that I need and I will assign all the colors at the same time to the trackers that I need. So now that I have these trackers in there, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to convert these trackers into a mesh. So there's a couple of ways of approaching this. So you could right click and then you could go and mesh operations, and you have a lot of these elements here that are the same ones that are here. And the goal is for us to convert it to mesh. So you can either use the right click or you can use the menu that I just activated clicking on the mesh here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to mesh, and you notice little dots just appeared. I'm not going to zoom in here at this stage because I'm going to screw everything over at that stage. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and triangulate these so it creates just a mesh. And the mesh, what it's going to do is going to connect all these points. It's going to look awful, by the way. All right, so I'm just going to triangulate that, boom, and there is a new mesh. So now that we have that, we have a mesh there that kind of points to the location where that actor is going to be at the end of the section. Also, we could do a couple points back here if we wanted it to and things like that, but we don't need it. All right, so now that we have that, I'm going to relock the camera, and there you go. There's another piece of geometry in there that will help the 3D artist understand exactly where things are at. We could do that with anything that we want. We could do it with a wall, we could do it with door, we could do it with, let's say, the desk, for example. You could select this, and these four faces, for example. I could go back to the mesh tab, and what I want to make sure is I'm always facing forward. That means into the projection. So I want to be coplanar with that projection. Convert to mesh, triangulate, boom. And there you go. Now we have an area there. Remember that it's going through the point, so it's not going to give you a square in there. So I'm going to do that because that's an awful piece of geometry there. And let's go back and lock it. All right, so we're ready to move and render this. So how you re-render is very easy. There's a couple of ways. You could click on this render button right here and it automatically moves to the preview movie. This is only available on the perspective view. Just keep that in mind. It's only available in the perspective view when you're there, okay? And that's what we want you to render, is that perspective view. Okay, so that's the way that we're going to do it. Just click on render there. If by some reason you don't find it, the other thing that you could do is you could right click or just go back and let's set up perspective again. Let's lock it down. Let's navigate there. Another way that you could do it is essentially you could right click and you have a preview movie at the bottom there. My preference is to actually go ahead and I want everything to be unselected, and I'm going to click render there. That's probably the best one. So now that we have it there, the next thing that we want to do is we want to navigate. You follow your instructions, navigate where you're going to save the preview movie. By default, Cintize is going to jump to wherever it wants. It's a default folder that it will have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to week 1. I'm going to go to my deliverables or whatever you want. I usually go to the tracking folder. That is the preferred one. And in there, I'm going to label it exactly the same way that my last save was. So this save was my version 8. I save it exactly the same so I always know where the movie came from. This is important in production. If not, you never know which version you were working on. So I'm going to save it like that, but when I deliver it, when you guys deliver it to us, you're going to put your last name, your first name. You're going to do essentially what is required from me in the instructions. So I'm going to hit save. And now that I have that, the next thing is, before I go to the compression settings, we want to show all viewport items. So click on that. Show all viewport items, show grid. We want to see the grid. We want to see the horizon line, so all that will come included. Okay, and the anti-aliasing we want to have from medium to high. That's going to be important. Make sure that you don't render low. We don't need the alpha and we don't need the depth. Then go to compression settings. H.264 video is perfectly fine. And then we're going to hit OK. And then you hit start. Okay, so as soon as you're done, the movie will actually open. Okay, and you should see something like this. So essentially, this pretty much what we need to see. We want wireframes, most of it. If by some reason you have a solid mesh, go back and make sure that they're wireframe. If you can't find it, then we will have problems. If you notice nothing is jittering or anything like that, there's one more thing that we tend to do in production is actually to put a matrix to see how stable is the actual track in front of the camera in the areas that are going to be close. Because if you're going to have any objects here close to the camera, right now we don't have anything there in that geometry. And it's a good rule of thumb to actually have things closer to the camera in the midsection and on the background, because anything on the background always looks great far away. But when you put things closer, that's when you really know if the element actually works. So let's go ahead and do another render, but we will do it with that in mind. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a matrix. So go into the quad perspective. I'm on the 3D view. I'm going to hit 8 on all these guys so they zoom out very quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a matrix here. And this could be another version that you could submit. So if by some reason you don't have anything on the front view or anything like that, then you could use a matrix in order to do that. And you probably have seen this in demo reels and stuff like that. And the goal of the matrix is to be able to see things floating in space like this in order to know if there's a big jitter in front of the camera. If the camera is very jittery in the front, then you know you haven't done a good job and you still need to go back and tweak and stuff like that. The other thing that you could do is just put objects in the close proximity on those locations where are closer to the camera. They pass really close to the camera. So that would be another way that you could set up some geometry in order to be able to see that. Now, you also have the options to tweak those. So if you click here, you'll be able to tweak the amount of points in the matrix. We only need some points to be closer than others, and that's about it. You don't need a very heavy matrix in there. Right there, that one is not showing points where we need them. And so you might need more or less, and there you go. So that's pretty good. Now, if by some reason you want solid objects, you could click on any of these, or in the overall view, right click, and if you go to view, right here, you're going to have solid meshes. Is also, you got the shortcut for that there. Now, this is what is going to happen with solid meshes. We don't want to see this because it doesn't allow us to see through it and to be able to gauge what is happening. So if this happens, you want to make sure you right click or you hit that the shortcut key to make it wireframe. But if you still want to see a little bit of solid, then you have to do it one at a time. What you're going to do is you're going to lower the opacity. So about 0.2 is pretty good for this one. And then you could select your other geometries, and as you go through your other geometries, you will be able to do the same thing one at a time. Or you could use you could use one of my favorite floating graphs, the hierarchy view. Select your shapes in there, and one at a time until you make them all transparent. So that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna go back to the wireframe mode, and before we render, let's go ahead and do a couple things to make sure that we could see the wireframe a little bit better. So if you notice your first render, it's kind of light on the light section, so it's harder to see the wireframes. So what we want to do is we want to right click on the view. Again, I'm still in the perspective view. And in here, you're going to experiment with the view modes right here. And one of the ones that I want to do is I want to turn off the lit wireframes. And you're going to notice they're a little bit brighter. And it's because now there's no light affecting it. Right click again, go to view. And also I'm going to turn off occluded wireframes so you could see what happens, right? So this is how you see it first, right? So you want to activate occluded in order to make sure that you see them the right way, okay? And that way you notice that you're not seeing through the wireframes and all that stuff. And that's how you're going to render it. So you're going to go through the same process, go to render, viewport items, make sure that you see all of them. And I already have rendered two versions of this so I can show you the difference. So I have the B version right here, and this is the version how you had it before, okay? Without the matrix, with the matrix, sorry. And you can notice how the lines are really hard to see. Okay, it's really hard to gauge what is happening there. And then we have another version that is the one that I just did with this scenario, and you notice that it's a lot easier to see all the lines where everything is located and things like that. So this is how we want you guys to deliver everything. Make sure it's not solid or anything like that. This is probably the best option for you. So have a great night, take care, and hope to see your submissions soon.